In Alchian's paper on uncertainty, evolution, and economic theory, he's thus far argued that success is based on results and not motivation. He argues that understanding the decisions of the system are more important than understanding the decisions of the individuals within that system. But to move us into section 3 and to better understand how the motivation and competence of the actors can not matter, we're going to look into an in-class experiment. So in what follows, you'll see a brief overview of a classroom experiment. The experiment creates an active learning environment that can help us explore these Alchian-esque ideas. This activity is called the Alchian Maze, and you can see a full overview of the activity by clicking on the link in the video's description. All right, so here is an overview of the Alchian Maze experience.
So how does the Elgin Maze game work? What you do is you take a series of index cards, put them in rows and columns on the ground, and on the underside of the cards, you have them marked. So you have them marked with either a go, that means you get to keep continuing on in the game, or an X, or something that indicates that you have to stop and start over. You set up the game by first laying out the cards in some kind of pattern that has a series where you can keep going and somehow make it all the way through the maze. And then what you do is you ask for some volunteers to play the game. You get some students to come up. You start them on one side of the game. You explain the simple rules to them, and then you just let them go and provide them with some incentive for each time that they get through the maze. The students can go one spot at a time, either forward, sideways, backwards, diagonal, whatever they want. They get to move one spot at a time, and they're trying to get from the starting side to the finish side. So here's an example of the game in action.
So to make sure that we understand the rules, we're going to go through it one time, just the first step real quick. So everybody's going to go to the first step. So you're just going to go to your one, and I'm going to have you pick up yours first, so A1. So he would look at his, and it says go. So he could keep going, right? You could look at yours. What would yours say? It would say go, so he could keep going. Hers says go, so she keeps going. He gets the X, right? So he has to put it back down where, how it was, and now he's out. So what did yours say? Yours was go, so you're still going. So they would have taken one turn. If it says go, you can keep moving from there. Once you're out at D, you can start wherever you want. So you don't have to start back at D and just continually lose, right? Or if you get it right, you can start wherever you want from here on out, right? I just set you up so we can see that part of it. All right? All right, go ahead. Take your turns. Keep going. You can just all go at once. Just take your next steps. If you get over to me, you end up with a piece of candy. So you go ahead, look at it. You're going at your own rate.
Tim, I'm sorry.
Okay, well, this is unfortunate.
Wow.
Dang.
Awesome.
All three of these are bad.
Wait, why did I do that?
Yeah.
I'm just gonna.
I'm sorry. Just trying to get that part out. Got it, buddy.
We need to keep turning.
Nope. All right, you guys get the point? All right, let's give it up for a volunteer.
So I want to analyze this game in a couple of stages here. First up, I want to look at just the kind of first time through for all the players of the game. The first chances that they took until they eventually got out of the game. The first time they went through, some of the people got further than others. They kind of win just because of luck, right? So one of the students actually was out right away from their first step. There was no foresight, however, in the players that got further the first time through. They didn't know the odds really of like what was going to happen. They weren't smart and somehow figured out how I was going to lay out the maze better than other people. It was just pure luck, right? Some made it a little bit further. They won. They got further into the maze that first time through. In part 3 of his paper on uncertainty, evolution, and economic theory, Alchian is just looking at the ability of the environment to adopt the appropriate survivors in the absence of any adaptive behavior by the players themselves. Just as the first attempts through the maze in our experiment, it was just the situation was adopting who made it through. We saw that some people would win in this situation, but there wasn't any copying of other paths or anything at this point in time. That is the element that Alchian is trying to isolate here in part 3 of his paper. This idea that, quote, sheer chance is a substantial element in determining the situation selected. We like to think of the evolution of a system moving forward as kind of like a X-Men mutation moving us forward, that the gains are somehow coming from us growing and getting better at things. We are the masters of our economic universe. Alchian's point is humbling. The environment adopts those that can survive. We look smarter because only the ones that made the decisions that worked survived. To quote Alchian, the survivors may appear to be those having adapted themselves to the environment, whereas the truth may well be that the environment has adopted them. This is a really key distinction to understand Alchian's main contribution here. Is it us adapting, or is it us being adopted by the system? Alchian is saying that we often think of it as us adapting and figuring everything out, and it's from us, whereas in reality, it's from the situation adopting us. Now, Alchian isn't going to deny that we can't adapt at anything or, kind of use our logic or anything, but here in part 3, he has isolated just this element of the economic system adopting the survivors. He's basically reversing the causation on us. We often think of it as us adapting and moving everything forward, whereas in reality, it's just the situation adopting us. So he's reversed the story here. We didn't survive because we're smart. We're called smart because we survived. We miss this because we only look at the survivors, and this ties very much so into this famous concept called survivorship bias. And here we have pictured kind of the famous depiction of survivorship bias. And this comes from World War II researchers at the Center for Naval Analysis. And they had conducted a study of the damage done to aircraft that had returned from missions in World War II. They looked at this damage and they said, okay, well, we got to make this recommendation. We have these trade-offs between how much armor we have on our planes and how well they can fly and do different maneuvers and different things like that. And so they looked at these planes that had returned, and they come up with a figure that kind of looks like the one on the right here with the red dots on it showcasing the places that the planes had been hit, right? And so what happened is they recommended that armor be added to the areas that showed the most damage, these areas with the red holes in them. Well, statistician Abraham Wald noted that the study only considered the aircraft that had survived their missions and returned home. The bombers that had been shot down were not present for any assessment or analysis. The holes in the returning aircraft then represented areas where a bomber could take damage and still return home safely. Wald proposed that the Navy instead reinforce the areas where the returning aircraft were unscathed. Those were the areas that if the aircraft was hit, it would cause the plane to be lost. And you can see the engines, the cockpit, and kind of narrow regions along the back where the plane may fall apart if it's hit too much. This is the idea of survivorship bias. We only look at the survivors, right? We do this in other areas of our life. We consider the quality of artistic production through history. And what we do is we look back and we only see the best of the best from the past, and then we compare it with all of today. And we always think, oh, well, the past, it was so much more artful and well-rounded and cultured and just higher quality stuff. You can also think of this, an idea of survivorship bias. Imagine getting financial advice from someone who's won the lottery. Or another example, think of every business book ever written, right? Why is the advice always changing? Because we have survivorship bias. The authors of these business books are the ones who made it. Hey, I did it this way and it worked for me, right? It doesn't mean that that was the best path for everyone. Think of the advice of many of those who have dropped out of high school or college and went on to create really successful businesses. This isn't necessarily a good strategy for everyone. It happens to have worked for some people, but we never hear the stories of those who it didn't work for. And this takes us to Alchian's story in his paper that really highlights the idea of survivorship bias. His analogy of the travelers from Chicago. Here are Alchian's words, a useful but unreal example. Assume that thousands of travelers set out from Chicago, selecting their roads completely at random and without foresight. Only our economist knows that on but one road there are any gasoline stations. He can state categorically that travelers will continue to travel only on that road. Those on other roads will soon run out of gas. Even though each one selected his route at random, we might have called those travelers who were so fortunate as to have picked the right road wise, efficient, foresighted, etc. Of course, we would consider them the lucky ones. If gasoline supplies were now moved to a new road, some formerly luckless travelers again would be able to move, and a new pattern of travel would be observed, although none of the travelers had changed his particular path. The really possible paths have changed with the changing environment. All that it is needed is a set of varied, risk-taking, adoptable travelers. The correct direction of travel will then be established. Instead of seeing the gains as coming from us, the smart ones that figured everything out, we should see that it is just survivorship bias speaking to us. The gains can be seen instead as simply the environment trimming what does not work and adopting those that do. In section 3 of his paper, Alchian reinforces this idea with a metaphor of how a plant grows. Successful plants will bend and grow where the sunlight is. They will grow to the sunny side of buildings. It is not from the smarts of the plant that this outcome was discovered. It was from the context. The context the plant was in would not allow growth in shaded areas. Only the light-facing areas of the plant are adopted by the setting. In the past Behavioral Political Economy Overconfidence lecture, we saw that we create stories. So we had the story of the traffic lights on the way to work, or the story of the kids' toys with the TED Talk and how kids, send toys to their parents or not. And we had the story from Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow about the creation of Jane being pickpocketed while visiting a city. These stories create simple connections of causation. And that's what we're really looking at here. The simple story we tell in markets is that we do the driving, that we figure things out and push things forward. This is a parallel to the plant figuring out the way to grow towards the sun. In economics, the story we create is that we solve the market problems. This Alchian point here says, no, the market problems really solve us. It is not from our hyper-rationality that markets are driven forward. We aren't the ones solving the massively complex problem of markets. Well, how does economic evolution work then? One overlooked thing Alchian points us towards in this section is that we should not forget that chance or luck is one method of achieving success, especially when we face complex problems like trying to sort through the world's subjective economic trade-offs. And he'll strengthen this case in the upcoming sections of the paper, which are covered in the next videos.